For centuries, the peaceful Aerith coalition had lived in safety under their grand councils. They built gardens across moons, floating cities on gas giants, and shining academies where young scholars studied the mysteries of the stars. War had become only a subject of history lessons, spoken of as something primitive and far away. But peace never lasts forever. From the rim of the galaxy came the Karth Dominion, a brutal empire that lived only to conquer. Their fleets cut across the stars like a storm. Whole systems fell in days. Worlds that had never known war found themselves under fire. The Dominion did not negotiate. They demanded surrender, and when surrender did not come fast enough, they made an example. Cities burned, populations fled, and silence followed wherever their banners were raised. In the central chamber of the Coalition Council, the leaders of many species gathered. Their holographic forms surrounded the circle table, all speaking at once. Fear was heavy in the room. "They will reach us within 2 cycles," cried Chancellor Vera, her insect-like wings trembling. "Our fleets are not ready. Our ships are built for trade, not war." An elder from the Finn species shook his head slowly. His voice was thin but steady. "We must send the call. Someone, anyone, must come to our aid. Alone we cannot resist." The council fell into silence. Sending a galactic distress call was not a small choice, it was an admission of weakness. But they had no other path. The message was prepared. It was not a simple request, it was a desperate cry, broadcast across every frequency, translated into every known tongue. To the free people of the stars, the message said, "We, the Aerith Coalition, face destruction at the hands of the Karth Dominion. We beg for aid. We ask not for conquest, but for protection, for unity. If you can hear this, if you value peace, come. We need you." The message spread like fire. It traveled past nebulae and wormholes, through ancient gates and forgotten stations. Across the galaxy, species heard it. Some pitied them, some cursed. The Dominion, but most turned away. The Trin hierarchy heard it and silenced the message at once, unwilling to risk war. The wealthy Seville trade union shook their heads. Business was safer than sacrifice. Even the proud Crelan Guard, once defenders of justice, ignored it. None wished to face the Dominion's wrath. Weeks passed. The coalition received only silence. The council chamber, despair grew. "No one will come," whispered Vera. "We will stand alone." But then 1 cycle later, a signal arrived. Small, rough. Not the polished tone of an empire, not the refined signature of great fleets. It was clumsy, filled with static, but it was real. "This is Earth," the voice said. The council members frowned. Few had ever heard the name. Those who had only remembered strange stories, half-myths, spoken in low voices. "Earth?" one of the elders asked. "That backwater death world? I thought its people barely left their system." More signals followed. "We received your call," another human voice said. "We know what it means. You're asking for help. We're coming." The aliens exchanged worried glances. The word Deathworlder carried weight in the galaxy. It was a classification given to worlds so hostile that most life could not survive there. Earth was one of the worst. Constant storms, predators with teeth longer than a hand, diseases that wiped out millions, climates that froze or burned. To grow there meant to grow hard. The stories of humans were confusing. Some claimed they were reckless and dangerous, always fighting among themselves. Others said they were clever survivors, capable of things no other species would attempt, but none had ever seen them take part in galactic matters. "Can we trust them?" Chancellor Vera asked. "What choice do we have?" The elder replied. When the human fleet finally appeared, it was unlike anything the coalition had expected. Their ships were not elegant or graceful. They were not polished silver like the Seville traders, nor shining white like the Crelan defenders. Human ships looked scarred, dark, patched with armor. They seemed less like machines of travel and more like predators themselves. Every hull bore the marks of testing, as if each ship had survived 1,000 battles before this one. When the first human captain spoke through the communicator, His tone was calm, but sharp. Coalition Council, this is Commander Harris of Earth's Expeditionary Fleet. We got your message. We know the Dominion. We've read your reports. We're here to stand with you. The aliens looked at one another. You came? One asked carefully. Yes, Harris answered. You asked for help. Humanity doesn't ignore calls like that. The coalition chamber buzzed with quiet confusion. No empire had dared to move against the Dominion, yet these humans who had little history in galactic politics had come without hesitation. Privately, many council members whispered doubts. They are Deathworlders. They may cause more harm than good. They are. Too few. Look at their numbers. How can they stand against an empire? They are reckless. They will lead us to ruin. But others remembered the silence of the great powers, the empty promises of those who looked away. And they remembered the fire in the humans' voices. They are here, the elder said softly. That is more than can be said for the others. Still, unease remained. For the first time in centuries, the coalition would fight a war, and their allies were strangers who grew up on a world that tried to kill them every day. When the human fleet descended on the coalition's central world, crowds gathered to see them. Children clung to their parents, pointing at the sharp-angled ships. The humans disembarked in armor that looked heavy and worn, their faces weathered, their eyes sharp. They smiled in ways that unsettled the aliens, smiles that hinted not of comfort but of challenge. Deathworlders, one alien whispered. Yes, another replied. But perhaps Deathworlders are exactly what we need. The council watched the humans with a mixture of fear and hope. The first steps of an alliance had been made, but no one could predict what would follow. The humans had answered the call, but the question remained. Were they saviors, or a storm that would consume everything? Far away in the dark of space, the Karth Dominion prepared for their next strike, and for the first time in their long campaign, they would not meet frightened prey. They would meet humanity. The coalition had seen many species walk among their cities. Tall, feathered merchants, scaled diplomats, glowing engineers whose bodies shimmered like crystal. But none of them looked like the humans. When the first landing craft touched down, on the coalition capital, thousands gathered at the spaceport. The humans stepped out in lines, their boots heavy against the platform. Their armor was not shining or ceremonial. It was dented, scratched, and patched in many places. Each piece looked like it had been tested again and again. The aliens were used to armor designed to impress, polished for display. Human armor, however, was designed only for survival. At the front walked Commander Harris, the human who had spoken to the council. His voice in person was steady, deep and strangely calm. He carried no weapon in his hand, yet even without it he looked dangerous. The way he stood, the way his eyes scanned every angle, it was the look of a creature who expected trouble at any moment. Beside him walked Captain Elena Ruiz, tall and sharp-eyed, with a scar running across her cheek. She noticed how the aliens flinched when they saw it. For her, it was just a reminder of a training accident years ago, nothing more. But the aliens whispered among themselves, shocked by the idea that a person could carry such a mark and still walk with pride. Council members, Harris said, bowing his head slightly. On behalf of Earth, we thank you for receiving us. We are here because you asked. We do not come as rulers. We come as allies. The words were polite, but the tone was firm. Chancellor Vera studied the humans closely. She leaned toward one of her aides and whispered, "They do not fear us, not even a little." The aide replied softly, "Perhaps that is what makes them dangerous." The council invited the humans into the grand chamber. The room was filled with banners and shining crystal walls that shifted colors with the light. It was meant to inspire awe. Yet the humans looked around with little reaction. Their eyes lingered not on the beauty but on the exits, the corners, and the guards. They were studying the room as if it were a battlefield. The elder Finn, who had supported sending the call for help, greeted them warmly. "We thank you for coming, children of Earth." Few others had the courage. Harris nodded. "Courage is born from necessity. On our world, Survival is never guaranteed. When someone calls for help, we know what it means. We cannot look away. Some of the council members shifted uneasily. They had expected speeches about honor or friendship. Instead, the humans spoke of survival, as if everything to them was a matter of life and death. Later, a joint training was arranged between human soldiers and coalition defense forces. The aliens wanted to understand their new allies. The training field was filled with observers. The coalition soldiers were graceful, moving in well-practiced lines. Their weapons gleamed, their movements were efficient. Then the humans stepped forward. Instead of polished formation, they moved with raw energy. They shouted to each other, laughed even, their boots kicking up dust. But when the drill began, they became terrifying. The scenario was a simple ambush simulation. The aliens advanced carefully, shields raised. The humans, however, charged directly, into cover, sliding behind barriers, firing while moving. They used smoke grenades not just to hide themselves but to confuse their opponents. One soldier even pretended to be injured, drawing the enemy forward, only for two others to strike from the side. The aliens watching murmured in shock. This was not training as they knew it. It was messy, loud, and unpredictable. But it worked. Every time the humans adapted, twisted the scenario, and turned it in their favor. When the drill ended, a young coalition officer approached Captain Ruiz. His voice was hesitant. Why do you fight like that? It looks reckless. It looks dangerous. Ruiz smiled faintly. Because it is dangerous. That's the point. Our enemies will not play fair. On Earth, nothing plays fair. You learn to take risks, or you don't survive. The officer swallowed hard and said no more. That night, many in the coalition whispered their doubts again. These humans, they fight like beasts. They will draw the Dominion's fury even faster. They are unpredictable. How can we trust them? But there were also new voices among the whispers. They do not give up. They are fierce. I have never seen such boldness. Perhaps this is what we need. The council held another meeting with the humans. Maps of the galaxy glowed above the table, showing the advance of the Dominion. Entire sectors had already fallen. Harris stood before the display, his hands clasped behind his back. You're losing because you're fighting the Dominion on their terms. Straight lines, careful defenses, predictable strategies. They know how to crush that, but they don't know us. They don't know what it's like to fight someone who refuses to quit, no matter the cost. One of the council members, a tall crystalline being named Solène, spoke sharply. And what cost is that, human? Your ways may bring destruction to all of us. We value life. We cannot throw it away recklessly. Harris met his gaze calmly. Neither can we. But sometimes the only way to protect life is to risk it. That is the lesson of Earth. We don't seek death. We seek survival. And survival means fighting back. The room fell silent. It was the elder Finn who finally spoke. I believe the humans speak truth. We asked for help. Now we must accept it, even if it is not the help we expected. Outside the chamber, alien citizens gathered to watch the humans walking through the city. Children stared at them, curious and unafraid. Some even approached, touching the strange fabric of human uniforms. The humans knelt and smiled, offering them small tokens, badges, coins, simple things that meant little to humans but made the children light up with joy. One old alien merchant shook his head in wonder. They are not like the stories, he murmured. They are not monsters, they are something else. But not everyone was convinced. A secret report circulated among the higher council. It warned that the humans might be too aggressive, too wild, and could drag the coalition into battles they could never win. Yet despite the doubts, one truth was undeniable. When no one else had answered, humanity had come. And soon, they would have the chance to prove themselves. On the outer edges of coalition space, Dominion scouts had been spotted. Their ships were gathering, preparing for the next strike. The coalition trembled at the news, but when Harris heard it, he only smiled grimly. Good, he said. Then we'll finally get to show you what Deathworlders can do. The aliens looked at him with wide eyes, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. For centuries, they had lived, in peace, believing war belonged to the past. Now, standing beside the humans, they realized that the past was returning, but this time, they would not face it alone. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The warning came at dawn, when the twin suns of Aerith Prime were just rising above the horizon. Dominion warships had entered the outer system. Their formation was tight, their movements sharp, like blades ready to cut. Inside the Coalition's command hall, panic filled the air. Holographic maps flickered red as Dominion ships pushed closer. "They are advancing faster than we expected," cried Chancellor Vera. "Our fleets cannot match that number. If they reach the planet, we are finished." But Commander Harris stood calm, arms folded across his chest. "Numbers don't win wars," he said firmly. "Will does. And right now, we're going to show them that you're not prey anymore." The aliens stared at him, uncertain whether to believe such confidence. To them, the Dominion was a storm that swept aside everything in its path. But to Harris and his crew, this was simply another challenge. Preparing the battlefield, human ships moved into position. They did not line up in neat ranks like the Coalition expected. Instead, they scattered, each ship darting into places that seemed random, behind asteroids, near debris fields, even skimming dangerously close to the system's star. Coalition officers watched in confusion. "This is madness," whispered one of them. "They will be picked off one by one." But Captain Ruiz only smiled. "You'll see, we don't fight fair, that's the point." On the ground, human soldiers worked with Coalition defenders to set traps. They rigged abandoned satellites with explosives, mined orbital paths, and built decoy signals to confuse enemy scanners. To the Coalition, it looked chaotic. To the humans, it was art. The Dominion arrives. The first wave of Dominion. Ships broke into the system, black and sharp, carrying banners of conquest. Their commander broadcast a message across all channels. "Surrender now," the voice thundered, "or your worlds will burn." The Coalition Council flinched at the words, but Harris only leaned toward the communicator and replied, his voice steady. "We don't surrender. Not today. Not ever." The battle began. Chaos in the star's Dominion ships advanced in tight formation, weapons blazing. Coalition ships held back, hesitant, unused to direct war. Then the human fleet struck. From behind an asteroid, a human frigate launched a sudden barrage, tearing through the side of a Dominion cruiser. Before the enemy could react, the frigate vanished into the debris, engines flaring like a predator slipping into shadows. Another human ship feigned retreat, drawing Dominion fighters after it. Just as the pursuers thought they had their prey, the humans lured them into a minefield. Explosions lit up the void, scattering the hunters. The aliens watching from the Coalition fleet could hardly believe their eyes. The humans fought with tricks, with misdirection, with sheer nerve. They turned the battlefield into confusion, where no Dominion order could hold. "This is not war," one Coalition officer whispered. "This is chaos." Captain Ruiz, listening, corrected him with a grin. "No. This is survival. This is what we do best." On the ground, while the fleets clashed, above, Dominion dropships attempted to land on one of the Coalition's moons. Coalition troops braced for impact, shields raised in fear. But the humans were already there. Hidden in trenches and rocky outcrops, they waited. When the dropships opened, human soldiers poured fire into the landing zone. Grenades rolled beneath, Dominion armor sending machines crashing down. The humans moved fast, shouting to one another, never holding still. The Coalition soldiers, inspired by their new allies, followed. For the first time, they fought not with hesitation, but with fury. They covered each other, pushed forward, and drove the invaders back. A young Coalition officer, the same one who had once doubted Ruiz, found himself shoulder to shoulder with a human sergeant. "Keep low," the human barked, pulling him out of enemy fire. Don't freeze, move, or you'll die standing still. The officer nodded, heart racing, and followed. By the end of the skirmish, he was breathing hard, his armor scorched. But he was alive and victorious. Turning the tide back in space, the Dominion fleet tried to regroup, but the humans never allowed it. Every time the enemy formed a line, humans broke it. Every time the Dominion pressed forward, humans dragged them into traps. At one point, a human destroyer rammed directly into a larger Dominion battleship, locking it in place while smaller human ships swarmed around it like wolves, tearing at a giant. The battleship exploded, shaking the whole system. The Coalition fleet, watching in awe, finally joined in. Encouraged by human boldness, they pushed forward, firing with renewed strength. For the first time in memory, the Dominion was forced to retreat. Aftermath. When the last enemy ship fled into the void, the battlefield was littered with debris and glowing wrecks. Coalition officers stared at the display, unable to believe what they had witnessed. "They ran," whispered Chancellor Vera in shock. The Dominion retreated. Commander Harris leaned over the table, his face calm but firm. "They'll be back. Don't fool yourselves. But now they know. You're not helpless, and they'll never forget that humans were the first to stop them." On the moon where the ground battle had taken place, Coalition soldiers gathered around their human allies. Some still trembled, adrenaline rushing through them. Others simply stared at the humans in disbelief. The young officer who had fought beside Ruiz approached her, bowing his head. "I thought you were reckless," he admitted. "But today I learned you are fearless." Ruiz placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not fearless," she corrected. "We feel fear. We just don't let it stop us." The Coalition began to see the humans differently that day. They were no longer just strange Deathworlders, reckless and dangerous. They were protectors, survivors, warriors who carried with them a fire the galaxy had long forgotten. A new reputation, news of the battle spread quickly across the stars. Systems whispered of the Dominion's first defeat. And in those whispers, one word carried weight: humans. Some called them reckless. Others called them savages. But more and more began to call them something else: hope. For the Coalition, hope was enough. They had seen the Dominion retreat, seen the humans stand unshaken against impossible odds. And in that moment, the Coalition understood that the galaxy had changed. The call for help had been answered, not by the mighty empires, not by the great fleets, but by the children of a death world who refused to bow. And as the humans prepared for the next fight, one truth echoed in every heart: the Dominion had met their match. The victory in the first battle gave the Coalition something they had not felt in years: hope. But hope was fragile. It flickered like a small flame, easily snuffed out. The Dominion was not defeated, only delayed. And when an empire built on fear is challenged, it does not retreat quietly. The scouts brought grim news. Dominion fleets were gathering again, larger than before. Not just raiders this time, but whole armadas. The Coalition's advisors trembled as the reports came in. "They bring a full war fleet," said Chancellor Vera, her wings folded tight. "They mean to crush us completely." Council members whispered in fear. Some even suggested fleeing, abandoning their outer systems and hiding deeper within the stars. Commander Harris stood at the center of the council chamber, hands clasped behind his back. His voice cut through the noise like steel. "Running will not save you. They will only chase you down system by system until nothing remains. The only choice is to fight, and fight together." The room went silent. An elder asked, "But how can we win?" "Their numbers are endless." Harris leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Numbers mean nothing if you break their will. The Dominion has never faced enemies who refuse to bow. Today, you will be those enemies. We will make them bleed for every inch. And when they see they cannot break you, they will falter." Preparing for the counterattack, the humans worked quickly, alongside Coalition forces. They turned planets into fortresses, mined star lanes, and built hidden supply stations. Coalition soldiers trained day and night with human instructors, learning how to adapt, how to improvise, how to fight not with fear, but with stubborn resolve. One young coalition officer, the same who had once doubted the humans, now stood at the front of the training line. "Move faster, cover your partner, don't freeze, fight back." His voice echoed across the field, carrying human lessons to alien ears. The council watched these changes with awe. Their people were transforming. They were no longer waiting for doom, they were preparing to meet it. Still, doubts lingered. And when the Dominion fleet finally arrived, those doubts returned with full force. The battle begins. The Dominion armada darkened the skies as it entered the system. Dozens of battleships, hundreds of cruisers, and swarms of fighters poured into formation. The coalition ships seemed small and fragile in comparison. In the command hall, tension was heavy. Coalition leaders looked at the display with despair. "We cannot hold against this," whispered one. But Harris stood tall. "You will hold, because we will make them pay." The human fleet moved first, darting into the enemy's path. They drew fire, weaving through laser storms with reckless speed. The Dominion pressed forward, confident in their overwhelming might. Then the traps were sprung. Mines hidden in asteroid belts detonated, ripping through fighter squadrons. Orbital cannons fired from moons thought abandoned. Coalition ships, once hesitant, now moved boldly, inspired by human audacity. But the Dominion was vast, and their pressure was relentless. Slowly, painfully, the line began to bend. The sacrifice. At the center of the battlefield was a choke point, a narrow corridor of space where the coalition had set its strongest defenses. If the Dominion broke through there, the capital would fall. A Dominion battleship, massive and bristling with weapons, pushed into the corridor, tearing through defenders. Coalition ships crumbled before it. "Hold the line," Harris shouted over comms. "Do not let them pass." But the defenders were failing. The enemy ship was too strong. Then a human voice broke across the channel. It was Captain Ruiz. Her ship, the Resolute, was heavily damaged, engines burning. "Commander," she said, her voice steady but calm. "There's only one way to stop that beast." Harris froze. He knew what she meant. "Elena?" "No." She smiled faintly, even as smoke filled her bridge. "We came here to fight for them. Sometimes that means giving everything. Tell them to keep going." Before anyone could stop her, the Resolute charged forward. Engines roared, shields flared, and the ship hurled itself into the battleship's path. Metal screamed as the two collided. For a moment, the void was filled with silence. Then, with a blinding flash, both ships exploded, fire consuming the corridor. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield. Dominion ships staggered, their formation breaking. Coalition soldiers watching the sacrifice felt their fear burn away. "They gave their lives for us," whispered the young officer on the ground. His hands tightened around his weapon. "Then we will fight for them." And fight they did. Rising together, the coalition, once timid, now fought like lions. Ships that had always retreated now pressed forward, chasing fleeing Dominion cruisers. Soldiers on the ground, once cautious, now charged with courage, shouting the humans' own words. Never give up. The Dominion, shocked by resistance they had never expected, began to falter. Their commanders had believed the coalition weak, easy prey. Instead, they found themselves fighting an alliance burning with new fire. At the command table, Harris watched the tide turn. His heart was heavy with the loss of Ruiz, but her sacrifice had done what no speech could. It had lit the spark in every soul. "Push them back," he ordered. "Show them what it means to fight with everything." The coalition obeyed without hesitation. For the first time in their history, they stood not as scattered worlds, but as one united force. Aftermath of the battle hours. Later, silence returned to the system. Dominion ships retreated, leaving wreckage behind. Coalition fleets floated victorious, battered but unbroken. In the council chamber, the leaders gathered once more. Many wept quietly, not for their own losses, but for the humans who had given everything. "They bled for us," Chancellor Vera said softly. They stood when none of us dared. We owe them more than we can ever repay. The elder nodded. We asked for help, and they came. Not for power, not for glory, but simply because we called. Commander Harris stood silently at the edge of the chamber. He carried no speech, no demand. He only bowed his head. Captain Ruiz did what humans have always done. She chose to stand when standing was hardest. Remember that, because the fight is not over. But now you know how to win it. The council rose to their feet. For the first time, they looked at the humans not with fear, but with deep respect. Legacy of the sacrifice. Word of Ruiz's sacrifice spread quickly. Across the galaxy, whispers grew louder. The Dominion had been halted again, not by a great empire, but by a small world of Deathworlders who refused to yield. In markets, in schools, in hidden colonies, people repeated the story. The humans came. The humans stood. The humans bled. And in every retelling, the message was the same. Hope had returned. The battle was over, but its echoes spread far across the stars. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion had been forced back. Not by a mighty empire, not by ancient guardians, but by the humans, children of a death world who had answered, a call no one else dared to hear. The Coalition's cities, once filled with whispers of fear, now thrummed with new energy. Banners of mourning and banners of victory hung side by side. People wept for their losses, yet stood taller than before. They had tasted both despair and hope had won. In the great council chamber, leaders from every world gathered again. This time their voices did not tremble. Instead, they carried strength. Chancellor Vera rose first. Her wings, once drooping with fear, now glowed with pride. We stood against the Dominion. We survived, and we did not survive alone. Humanity stood with us. Their courage became ours. Their fire became our fire. Today, we are not weak. Today, we are not afraid. Applause rippled through the chamber, louder than ever before. Commander Harris stepped forward, his face calm, his posture strong. He looked out at the gathered council. He carried the weight of sacrifice, the memory of Captain Ruiz heavy in his heart. But he carried something else too, resolve. We are not heroes, Harris said. We are survivors. On Earth, every day is a battle. Storms, predators, sickness. We learned to fight because our world gave us no choice. That is why we came, not for conquest, not for reward, but because you called. And when someone calls for help, humanity answers. His words struck deep. The chamber fell silent, every leader listening with unblinking eyes. The elder Finn spoke at last. You did more than answer. You reminded us who we are meant to be. For too long we lived in comfort, believing peace would last forever. But peace without strength is fragile. You taught us that strength is not cruelty. It is the courage to stand when others fall. The council voted, and without hesitation, humanity was named guardian ally of the Coalition, the highest honor they had ever given to an outside force. The humans did not cheer, nor did they celebrate loudly. They accepted quietly with nods of respect. Across the galaxy beyond the Coalition, the story spread like wildfire. Traders carried it from station to station. Refugees spoke of it in hushed voices. Soldiers repeated it in training camps. The Dominion had been stopped, not by power but by defiance, not by numbers but by will. And the name whispered in every retelling was the same: humans. Some called them reckless. Others still feared them. But many more began to see them differently. Humanity was no longer just a rumor from a dangerous world. They were protectors, fighters, allies who stood when no one else did. The Dominion, for the first time, hesitated. Their commanders studied the reports of the battles, confused by the humans' tactics. How could such a small fleet cause so much disruption? How could soldiers from a single harsh planet inspire whole civilizations to fight harder than they ever had? Fear crept into the Dominion's councils. Not fear of human weapons, but fear of human spirit. For spirit could spread. Spirit could not be crushed so easily. Among the people on the ground, ordinary citizens of the coalition felt the change most strongly. Children played in the streets, pretending to be humans charging into battle. Merchants proudly displayed goods from Earth, simple items like tools, books, and art, now symbols of strength. The young officer who had once doubted the humans now found himself a leader among his people. He trained his troops with human methods, shouting their words of defiance. Never give up, never bow. In marketplaces and schools, one phrase became common: fight like the humans. Remembering the fallen yet victory was not without cost. The coalition held a great ceremony to honor those who had fallen, both alien and human. At the center stood a statue of Captain Elena Ruiz, her likeness carved in stone and crystal, standing tall with her gaze fixed on the stars. Commander Harris placed a hand against the statue, bowing his head. "She did what all of us must be ready to do," he said. "She gave everything so that others could live. That is the legacy of humanity. Not conquest, not dominance, but sacrifice." Aliens who once whispered the word Deathworlder with fear now spoke it with reverence. To them it no longer meant only danger. It meant strength. It meant guardianship. It meant hope. A promise for the future. In private meetings after the ceremony, the council asked Harris what humanity wanted in return for their sacrifice. Riches, territory, influence, anything could be granted, but Harris shook his head. "We want nothing but this. When another cry for help reaches you, answer it. Don't wait for someone else. Don't hide in fear. Stand together. Because that's what saved you." The leaders nodded, moved by his words. They understood now. Strength was not just in ships or weapons. Strength was in unity, in refusing to abandon one another. The final message weeks later, as human ships prepared to return home, crowds gathered at the spaceport once more, but this time there was no fear in their eyes. Only gratitude, only respect. Children waved flags of both Earth and the coalition. Citizens shouted thanks in 100 languages. Some wept openly, reaching out to touch the humans as they passed. Harris stood at the ramp of his ship, looking back one last time. He spoke to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the field. "Remember this day," he said. "Not because humanity came, but because you chose to fight. You are no longer victims. You are defenders of your own stars. Carry that forward, and when the Dominion comes again, they will not find frightened worlds. They will find warriors." The crowd erupted in cheers louder than thunder. As the human fleet rose into the skies, their engines burning bright, the coalition leaders watched silently. One of them whispered, "The galaxy will never forget this." And they were right. For in every corner of the galaxy, in every whisper and every tale, one truth would echo for generations. When the galaxy cried for help, it was humanity's Deathworlders who answered, and the stars themselves would forever remember the day hope was carried on human shoulders.